Welcome this month to the Grand Campaign. I am Jan. With me, as always, are Josh and Richard. Today, we're going to we're going to wrap up our management of the Grand Campaign and continue to tell you guys why it's awesome to run a Grand Campaign. Again, Sly Flourishes, Lazy Dungeon Master is a great book. I love it. It's got some good info in there, but I think more than one standard deviation away from that, you have a group of people who have just heard the title Lazy Dungeon Master.
They're like, oh, that sounds good. I'm not going to read this because I'm a lazy dungeon master.
I'm a lazy dungeon master.
Yeah.
And actually, grand campaigns end up being easier to run, in my opinion, than, well, maybe not than one shots, but definitely than a short 5 to 10 session.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%.
So, as we always start off, how are your campaigns going, guys?
Well, mine are actually going, which is great. We had some travel and some sickness and other things like that, and so, but we met for a couple of Emboria sessions since we last recorded, which have gone beautifully. It's been very fun. Like sometimes you're like, okay, well, we played a game tonight, and that's good, and then other times you're like, oh man, this is like a magical experience.
Yeah. I was very excited that your group made it to the Red Isle because
Well,
I had been reading stories.
yeah, I was too because I have so much material and I've never been able to use it because they've just never gone there. But yeah, so we played some Emboria. We're very close to wrapping up Emboria, but actually that kind of leads me. So this is like a little weird, but we just finished the second arc. Next Fading Sun session, so it'll be Monday next. We're going to be wrapping up the second arc of the Fading Suns campaign, and we kind of sat down and had a talk after the game Monday night this week, which was fun. It was a great game, but we all kind of sat down and said, you know what? Collectively, as a group, we are not feeling this, and we figured out it's not really the characters we don't like. It's not really the story that we're not engaged with. It's just that I think that we're just not feeling the system.
Okay.
The system, and I think that some parts of the setting are just not. It really, Fading Suns as a setting, one of the implicit assumptions is there's a fair amount of world hopping that you get space opera. It's like, welcome to the jungle world, welcome to the city world, welcome to the desert world, things like that. And turns out that my playgroup enjoys things where you dug in more into one place, into one community. Which I'm not surprised by that because that's what I enjoy and that's really what we've been playing until now. So I think that we decided that collectively we're going to close the book on Fading Suns for now. I mean, I still have another 5 arcs of an insane campaign, which we might. I get to pull out some really great horror stuff Monday night. It was a lot of fun, but I've got another 5 arcs that maybe someday I'll go back and use, or maybe someday we'll revisit. But I think for now we're happy with what we've done. But also just like, I think collectively, we started talking about, so I started talking with that group, which has some overlap with my Emboria group. And we started talking about, well, hey, I'm working on this new act setting. Would you guys like to do something in that? Talking about different options. And somebody was like, well, I would just like to play Emboria. And so I was like, oh, okay. Because my other Emboria campaign, my current Emboria campaign is wrapping up, but it's going to be wrapping up with like a sort of a change the timeline. And or a resetting of the timeline or something like that. And so we don't exactly know what that's going to mean because it could mean a lot of different things. It's going to mean some blend of old and new.
Okay.
And I've already been working on the lore of what that's going to look like from a lore perspective, but from a perspective of anyway, so all that to say, I think we decided we're going to play Emboria, and they started talking about, hey, like, I would just like to do a nice long legacy campaign in Emboria that never ends. And I was like, oh, well, I mean, I guess if you guys are going to really twist my arm, I guess we could do that.
That's awesome.
And so I started thinking about, well, when this first campaign ends, so what's really going to happen is the Emboria campaign is not going to end. Because there's already like an overlap of 3 players. So we're like, and actually the 4th player in the Emboria campaign is getting married. She's not going to be able to play on the night we normally play Emboria, but she said, hey, and she's going to move an hour away, but she said, hey, if you guys are playing online on this other Monday, I'll just join there. So actually, Emboria is not ending. We're just moving it to a different Monday. And we're going to be starting, when we get to the end of this, we're just be starting with fresh characters.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it's going to be set in the Royal Wood. And it's going to be sort of dealing with Royal Wood. It's going to be dealing with the. I'm so sorry.
You're not, but it's okay.
And it's going to be dealing with the kind of the aftermath of the campaign that the players created for themselves. they're going to have to deal with those consequences now. So so that's kind of where we are in gaming terms. And then I'm working really hard on writing a setting gazetteer for my new Axe campaign, which
Which I really want.
I have some hope will go very long and last forever.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
yeah.
Josh, what about you, man? How's Gebercan?
I think we've only had a couple of episodes since the last episode of this, but it was pretty packed. They the party is currently on the hook because there's this problem. Ghosts are showing up in all the public places, scaring the hell out of people. It's a problem. Party tries to solve it, and in genuine good faith, they all jumped onto the druid turned into a giant eagle. Somebody else cast fly on themselves, and they just kind of tried to rush over the moat protecting the palace in the middle of a time of emergency without warning, without sending anything ahead of time. And so, the guards on the walls shot them down, thinking that they were part of, the attack. Players almost die. They fall just a stupid amount of distance. And then the party member who is the noble gets summoned by the king's troubleshooter because she comes from a family that has a really good reputation with, the common soldiery. He raised his sons that way, right? So this guy thinks that she's part of some kind of plot to destabilize the monarchy. She quickly proves incredibly incompetent at any kind of lying or subterfuge or anything like that. So he goes, okay, cool. But also, this huge section of the city watched your retainers rush the palace and get shot down. So we're going to need to hang one of them. And
Oh, snap.
That's great.
Oh, that's amazing.
And so, because of what the players did, they learned a lot of information about the ghosts, but also what they did set the ghosts off, and people died this time. And so, this guy is trying to figure out how do we settle this, right? The king and most of the nobility are leaving for the tournaments in 2 days, and we need to just lock down things now so that things are nice and stable when the king leaves. So they're hanging the guard captain who was on duty, and they need to hang one of the party. And the player convinced them to said, well, basically, look, we have this bard. When they walked into town, the bard rolled natural 20 on performing this song about their previous adventures. So that's currently out in the city, and the player goes, well, hold on. What if we can write and disseminate a song about these events that just kind of that makes everybody think that everything was fine? We were actually heroes. There's no problem. Rolled pretty well, so it was great. You've got until 7 p.m. tonight to write and disseminate a song good enough to overwrite the collective memory of these events.
It's the Rohlin rule.
And the players, this player knows this. This character knows this. The other characters don't. Meanwhile, they go off to pursue this contract to kill some monster that took people in the sewers. And they went off without their paladin noble. They hire somebody to go with them. That person dies immediately. The bard gets knocked out, and the other two flee. So while the noble has made a deal that their bard will write a powerful story and spread it, the bard gets knocked out and taken over by a creature that consumes spirit and muscle and whatever. And the other two had to flee.
We need to be playing this game.
The heck is going on?
So they flee. They flee through the sewers, grab and that's how that episode ended. And then the latest episode was the rescue of the bard, which they successfully pulled off.
So this is all more of a Geber can't kind of a situation.
That I've been making it. I'm I want to make Josh a t-shirt that says Geber can with a question mark, and on the back it says Geber can't.
So what ended up happening is now they've got this problem where They spent a good hour arguing over the content of the song that they were going to write. Because one of the things that they learned from the ghost is that the city is about to be destroyed. One of the players received an ancient message basically saying, "Hey, you, leader of this legion, retreat. The ground is not able to be held." And so one player is going, "Look, we need to include this into the song. People need to know about this. In this song, we need to write it such that the nobility don't leave the city because there's a threat coming." Of course, the nobility want to go off to their tournaments in the other cities, and the other players are going, "No, that's going to get us killed. We need to write like pro-monarchy things in here, and if we write something that pisses them off, they're just going to kill more of us." There were almost 2 songs. It was one of my favorite moments in the campaign so far, where they were just like, "Great, well, we're going to write this song, and you're going to write that song, and we're both going to spread."
You were like hitting all of Richard's high notes.
Yeah. The whole idea of like disinformation through
Poetry.
and like propaganda
Yeah.
and things like this. I mean, that's
My big takeaway is this is why giant eagles don't solve every problem in a story,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Why don't we just turn into a giant eagle and fly across the moat? Flames. Well, I'm gonna do an
So
after action. Oh, go ahead, Josh. Sorry.
I was just going to say, we were running on the end of the session and there was no resolution, so I set a timer on my phone for 5 minutes and put it in the middle of the table, and I said, when that's up, I needed, like, whatever is said after that point is going into the song.
Yeah, that's a nice variant. My version goes, "Oh, you have, sorry, how long have you taken? All right, an ancient green dragon blows through the wall, eats one of you."
I remember in one of the first TPKs when you guys collected all of those little tiles and then I had the puzzle, and everyone's like, "Oh, we're gonna solve the puzzle," and then I put a timer down, and suddenly everyone was like, "Okay, quick, move it as best as we can."
Yeah.
I have a lot going on. I'm actually going to do an after-action report next week on Behind the Screen, but my highlights were in the Jackals game. The group convinced one of the owl women to give them a divination, and we're like, "We're going to ask you all these things," and she's like, "No, you don't understand. This is a divination. This is an oracle." And I'm like, "Well, what's the difference?" And I'm like, "It's like you get yes or no questions." And the group then, I watched them
You told me about
process a flow chart of, well, what's our first question?
Yeah.
If yes, no, which way do we go?
Yes.
In the Torg game, they're in Tharkold, and thanks to a Clive Barker novel, so Tharkold is
Wasn't he like an actor?
no,
I'm thinking of Clive Owen.
you're thinking of Clive Owens. Yeah, no, Clive Barker is a horror writer.
Okay.
His book Damnation Game, so Tharkold's like Mad Max meets Hellraiser. And so I basically just, instead of going like really gross, over the top body horror, I put them in a casino and showed them the despair of Tharkold through the casino. I had everyone wildly uncomfortable, but not like overly so. But the best was, so I'm pre-testing, I'm refining some of the lore for our TPK game with the kids game. They met a green wizard. He wanted them to do something. Group was split half and half. It came down to Ben's daughter, Erin. And Erin was like, "I'll vote for you if you tell me everything I want to know about the orders of wizards." She blackmailed an NPC for lore. Just well done. You were playing this game right. So today we're going to be talking about, we're going to conclude our management. We've talked about time management. We talked about character management. But one of the threads that we kind of teased out is that running a grand campaign is so much easier story-wise because we're planning to invest in this region and these characters and these people. And I want to switch it up a little bit because Richard has really mastered this. We're going to kind of recap this. The idea that character management is way easier in a grand campaign because you can, I'm going to say funnel, but I don't mean that in like the DCC term. Although I've seen your role of heroes for Tor. It's funnel into a meat grinder, you know, how it works.
Listen, stuff happens in battles. Mass battles are usually where we would lose a lot of characters all at once. You know, we'd have you know, mass battles defending a settlement, or you know, fighting like the Goblin army outside the Fireheart or something, and like you would lose 3 or 4 PCs per session, and you would emerge at the other side of that battle, like which takes usually the mass battle, the way I run them, they usually take 2 or 3 sessions to play through. And so usually, very often, 1 or 2 people would make it all the way through, and their character was now the amazing, scarred, grizzled veteran that saw the whole thing and remembered everything happened before it. And then everybody else is just like brand new characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm working on a variant of the Legend of the Five Rings mass battle resolution chart.
Yeah.
Where basically, or we're going to cut a digression. You every round of the mass combat get to decide, where are you at in the battle? Are you flanking? Are you in the thick of it? Are you in the rear guard? Different tables for each, and then we'll play out each individual scene. But there's a Vagaries of War table, and you've still got to roll on it. So your scene may have gone really well, and you'll get a bonus to the roll. But there's still a chance that
So this is basically what I did for Tor, is something really similar, where you have 2 commanders, and commanders, you know, based on your battle skill. Then you get bonus dice for each side that will come up later, and then you play out a scene.
Yeah.
And the scene is they're trying to, you know, the Uruk-hai has the giant bomb, and he's running for the ditch, and shoot him, Legolas. You know, kind of a right. Yes.
Wait, no, that's a Jurassic Park.
Yes.
But still,
It's okay.
I gotta put that in. We gotta make that matchup. Where the guy goes to the guy from
That'd be amazing.
Shoot!
So yeah. So anyway, so you have a scene that plays out, and the scene is like, oh, they sally out, or you know, it's some kind of. I mean, I'm the sort of person. I think everyone here actually, the sort of person who like spent most of your childhood reading about medieval sieges instead of having friends.
Yeah.
So you know, there will be like some
or getting friends just so you had someone to talk to.
Yes. That's right. Yeah. Right, obviously. So, as the whole premise of this hobby,
That's
literally the premise of this whole hobby. So you'd have a scene, and then basically the scene would add or take away bonuses for the Vagaries of War roll, and then you make that roll, and that roll would determine. And basically, I would basically write a custom roll table for the battle beforehand, and so when you're rolling, you're actually rolling on that table. And then you adjust it based on bonus die and how the scene went. You adjust up or down, right? So the things on that table are specific to, usually there's like 8 or 9 items on there, but the things on that battle are specific to these armies and to these, and to this location, to this situation. You seize the high ground. It's over Anakin.
That's right.
Things like that.
Yeah, it's moral high ground. No? Literal high? Okay.
It's my players, so rarely
Rarely
do
the
it.
moral high ground. So
Okay, so
now I just
anyway,
want to talk about
digression.
mass
battles.
battles.
We'll do an episode.
We'll do an episode on mass battles.
Yeah,
I'm
they
gonna
come
get
up a
to
lot.
those.
They come up a lot, and there's almost no good way to handle them. That is like, you know, obviously the best way to handle them is to play Domains of War.
I was just going to say, there is one.
That's the best way to handle them, but that doesn't work for every play group. Yeah. So,
but what I do like about Domains of War is that it gives you, like, are you just doing rolls for the high campaign,
Right.
high level campaign, or are you digging down into like the middle ground where you're just focusing on the characters? When we get to that point, I do have the map printed out and I have all of the tiles.
Yes.
So like,
yeah, Domains of War is definitely
Ready.
very sexy. Yeah.
all right. So character management. We're here. How do groups form? Who plays in what group? We're not really talking about characters, but really more player management at this point. With a grand campaign, with the idea that players are going to have multiple characters. You talked a little bit about this last week. And players are going to have, they're going to want to start thinking about new characters. What NPCs are they going to want to be taking over? What is kind of your best, we'll start with Richard, we'll jump over to you, Josh. Kind of what's your thought on like, what makes a grand campaign unique about bringing all of these in to for new players, for new characters?
So I like to start campaigns and I've been thinking about this because obviously I'm about to start some new stuff. I like to start campaigns fairly in media res. I like to start things. You all work for the same person, and you're already on the road. You're halfway there, or you're standing outside the dungeon, or you're whatever. Like I like to start throw people into things.
Kick in the door and get started.
Later on, things become more sandboxy as they start to learn more about the world. They can make more decisions. But to start with, like, people just like they want to show up, they want to roll some dice. You know? So that's how I like to begin. And then what will naturally happen? Old characters die, new characters come around, things like this. Typically speaking. And this is just something we kind of figured out organically, I think, in the tour campaign, but also like it was based on the dynamic that we already had from playing a really long running Supers campaign before that. Basically, what we kind of figured out is, well, hey, listen, if we just, players would come to me and they say, hey, I need to make a new character. Is this NPC available? Right. And so I started saying, yeah, totally. That'd be great. And so it started with my character has died or my character is retired. So like in Tor, there was an almost TPK. I never TPK'd the entire group in Tor. There would always be like one survivor who ran away. Filthy coward.
I love how that's your only regret.
It's my only regret of that amazing campaign. It's like never killed them all at once. And so, but early on, I would say in about session 20 or so, there was a pretty bad. They made a very poor choice of route. Walked through the wrong part of Mirkwood, ended up getting ambushed by goblins and a basilisk. Anyway,
right part of Mirkwood?
Is
there a right part of Mirkwood?
Well, there are righter parts of Mirkwood.
That's right.
Or wronger parts of Mirkwood. Anyway.
Yeah, you never want to go down that dark alleyway in Mirkwood.
Yeah.
It may look like a shortcut, but
yes. Yeah. So they tried to take a shortcut. They were like, hey, we shave a whole bunch of miles off the trip if we just go through this part. And so they ended up getting ambushed and mostly wiped out. One character managed to run away and survive. And when all of that happened, some people made new characters, but my wife, Sophie, she came to me and she said, hey, there's this cool NPC that we helped out in Lake Town earlier. Would it be possible for me to play her? And I said, yeah, that'd be really cool. And that ended up probably being like one of her best characters that she ever played. Same with like one of Ben's best characters, Duvaniel, this elf character, was an NPC and kind of like an antagonist to the group. And then Ben ended up taking over, and he only played her for like 5 or 6.
Was this the one that killed me?
No,
that was another one of Ben's antagonistic elves.
But this is like the girl elf who was with him.
Oh
yeah. And so anyway, and so he ended up playing Duvaniel, and it ended up being one of his very best characters. And it was interesting because it was like the personality and the backstory and everything was more or less handed to him.
Yeah.
But then he just like leaned really hard into it and made it his own, and it was really cool.
Yeah, and that's the nice thing. Is like, as a GM, you can outsource NPCs.
Right. Yeah.
But the other thing is, for me, I love not having to. One of the things with a long-running campaign that you can worry about is what happens if we get to a session. We end a session with like Richard and Josh's character being the focus of the next session, and something comes up and they both can't make it.
Right. Oh, right. Yeah.
You can just say, well, does anyone have new character ideas? Let's start another group. Anybody have somebody who's wanted to try this? Like making a step away one shot is way easier, and you don't lose campaign momentum.
So this is kind of where I'm going then, is because we went from, so this worked really well, and then people started coming to me and saying, hey, could I make a character and you work them into the campaign as an NPC, but don't tell anybody it's my next character.
Yeah.
Like, let's just get to know them as an NPC, and then whenever my current character dies or retires, I'll switch to them. And so pretty much at one point, most of the people in the campaign had like 2 or 3 characters that they would just make, and they would send them to me, and I'd be like, oh, this is a great NPC, I need something over here, and I would just work them in. And so it was always kind of fun because they didn't know when they were going to meet their character. And then it would come up, and then I always like to throw a little spice in as like, oh, thank you for this character, they have a secret that you don't know.
That's right.
or they have a dark past they didn't tell you about, or something. Like always throw like a little bit of spice in, and so what ends up is you end up getting these very organic. We always call them backup characters or secondary characters or whatever. And yeah, anytime that let's say we're going to have a lot of people out or something like that, instead of saying, well, let's cancel tonight, or I guess we're going to play a board game or whatever, we would just say, cool, let's do something with backup characters. And
or
and
if
just
you
do
have
a
a really
little-
intense session, you're like, maybe we need a break for a week.
yeah, that's happened.
Yeah.
That's happened. Yeah.
Now Josh has used this really well. I got to play in one of these. When Josh hits a sticky lore situation, Josh will set up the lore as a one-shot.
Yep.
In the world.
Yeah.
Help. So why don't you talk about the way you've done that, Josh?
Which one did you play in? Was that was the oh, that's right. Okay. Yeah, so the first campaign ended in a TPK. And
Josh got his TPK in.
started a new campaign, but the characters they knew that some of those characters were dead, but they were like, hey, we have these people who we made really strong connections with. What would happen there? And I was looking at it and I was like, actually, yeah, you kind of have. So I got JM and Becca and a couple other people together, gave them NPCs from the first campaign to mount a rescue of the bodies or whatever's left of them, because they had, through a great deal of hard work, found and escorted and trained a cleric powerful enough to resurrect.
I like how the first thing he used there was bound.
Yeah, that's what I heard too.
Yeah. Okay.
What? No, found.
Oh. I was like,
okay.
wow, your game is really dark. Get the cleric out.
No. So we did a quick one shot where it's just like, yeah, okay, cool.
Must be a cleric of one of those drow gods.
Ooh.
I wanted death to be a permanent thing in the campaign, but also in the previous campaign, they had invested a lot of effort into this cleric, and they had actually, done it. And so I didn't want to just say, yeah, cool, okay, well, all of those characters are alive again. Why are we doing a different campaign, right? Why not just pick up a few? So they managed, I think they managed to get 2 of them out. And so I've told those players that those characters are out and about now. And one of them, her, so a werewolf character, was also really connected in with all of the things that were going on that ended up killing the party somehow, and she didn't know how, but she was having all of these dreams and visions and things like that. And that's one of the characters that
It's a thing.
It's one of the characters that they managed to rescue. So we've actually done one shot as well with that character.
Yeah.
And what she would have done, now that pretty much everybody else is dead, and where to go after that. And I ran a post-death sequence just to tease things.
But you've also done like high level, like I wanted to see how the war with the Striathi ended, so let me hand characters.
Yeah, that one. I still can't wrap my mind around that one. Yeah, I've got a world that's really old, and it was what is left is what was left after a cosmic war. So what the hell was left? Well, I don't know, and my brain won't let me create things like that unless I know how that war ended. But that war was just something I wrote out in 3 lines on paper, and then went, good, okay, now I can build this world. No, I can't.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've done a few battles. Right, you've got this incredibly powerful artifact. Great. This battle is about finding out what happened to it. Where did it end up? Right? Was it successfully, safely stowed away, or did they run out of time and it was taken? Things like that.
Yeah. And something that works extremely well for me, this is kind of like that, but on the front end, is there would be times where the party might have, like slightly split or slightly divided goals.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of us want to go over here and do this, and others of us want to go over here and do this. And so in those cases, what I would very often do, because I always have, I think most of us probably have people who are like, hey, I can't commit to like a full campaign or whatever, but like if you ever want to run a one shot or like a little mini campaign or something, let me know. I'd love to participate in that. And so what I do is tell two people, okay, you guys want to go reclaim the Fireheart Mine. You guys go over here and do that, and we'll invite these people to join in for the duration of that. And then also, basically, if you do this organically, what it ends up doing is you always have your core group of players, and then you have, and their characters. But then they have, here's my core character, and then here are my 2 or 3 extras that I don't always play them, but when I do, when we go to a certain place or something like that, then I've got them queued up. And then, but then you also have the same thing happening with your players, where here's my core group of players, they show up to every session, and then farther down the hierarchy or farther out from the center, I have people who are interested in joining for a little bit. And then sometimes some of those people become really good players in the long run.
And they get worked.
Yeah, so there is a little bit of a funnel, again, not in the DCC sense necessarily, but like a little bit of a funnel so that you always have, you have enough characters, like tertiary characters, secondary and tertiary characters, and enough secondary and tertiary players. And this is really important to keeping something like the grand campaign going, because obviously the biggest difficulty of something like this is people's real lives often come up and they interfere with and get in the way of your fun times, right? So if you don't have secondary, tertiary players kind of queued up, so what happened with Tor is that we had 2 people, Sophie and Ben, who were with me from the start of the campaign to the end. And then we had other people who dropped out and then came back later. And so actually Jonathan, Sophie's brother, was at the beginning, in the campaign at the beginning, and then he had to drop out for a while because of life stuff. And then he came in again at the end. And things like that. So you have, but then we also had a lot of other people, like some of my best players didn't come in until halfway through. So it was a 7-year campaign, but they played like 3.5, 4 years, but they were still like the most invested. Their characters were amazing. It was great.
Well, I mean, we had the same thing in our RuneQuest game. We had 4 people at the start, and then we lost 2, and we ended up having, like, I would say, adding... Who did we add back in? We added Corey. Corey was one of the, like, Odros was one of the best players at the end of that, like, just hands down.
We lost Chris.
We lost Chris and we lost Abby.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
But the other thing, and Josh was the one who figured this out. Josh and Becca, one of the other nice things about the fact that you are committing to a long-term game is when you have, when the timer's on and you have to do 8 things and you have 5 seasons to do them, you can split the party. And you can say, listen, we have these 2 things, they both have to be done in the same time frame. All right, Richard and Josh, you guys are going to go this way. Becca and Corey, you're going to go this way. I need, what do you guys want to play that you've always wanted to try, but you can't? And now I have new NPCs because when those things come wrap up and the group dovetails back together, now I have more. The world is bigger and richer.
And the GM is never going to, as a GM, you're never going to say no to something like that because it's like I get to run more sessions.
Yeah, and it's not like well, guys, we only have 10 weeks to get through this. I can't devote another week to something like this. But one of the things that is nice about the Grand Campaign, as Richard says, you kind of start with your bang. But as the players kind of dig into this, they get more familiar with the world. And the story emerges. It becomes much more of a sandbox. You don't have to sit down and go, 20 levels. Okay, what's my beginning? What's my middle? What's my... There will be dozens of beginnings, dozens of middles, and a fewer ends, because in a Grand Campaign, nothing ever really ends. But it's less time.
Don't the great campaigns never end, Mr. Frodo?
That's right, Mr. Frodo. I want to hear the story about Odros. So, Richard, you're currently working, and I know you guys have been much better about this recently than I have, because I'm the I'm the a-hole who says, yeah, there's a setting guide. It's the Jackal's Core book. Read it. You guys have created regional players guides. You're working on one right now.
Yeah, well, I'm working on two actually because we're going to be starting the next leg of the Emboria campaign in a totally different area, and so I want to put together its own proper regional guide.
Well, what do you guys, when you were putting together a regional guide?
Yeah.
And I think you both have read Arbiter of Worlds, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Where
I read it back when it was just a bunch of
articles
on the Escapist.
I did too.
Take that.
I still have them printed out.
Drink this hipster coffee with no irony at all.
That's right. What are your top 5 things for helping your players ease into a grand campaign when you're putting your regional guide together? We'll start with Richard and then jump over to Josh.
Yeah, so I just do the Arbiter of Worlds thing. So this is Alexander Macros, who's the designer of Adventure Conquer King system. A long time ago, he was writing for a magazine called The Escapist, and they did a series of online articles about how to build a game setting.
Yeah.
And it was what he called it was like top-down zoom out, or top-down zoom in, or something like that.
Top-down zoom in.
Yeah, top-down zoom in. And basically, what he points out is that most people, when they do setting design, they'll either do a really heavy top-down. So like start with, here's all the lore and where do trolls come from and all this different stuff.
Emboria is operas.
Well, no. Well, sort of.
Yeah.
I mean, the world building for Emboria is like a different,
whole different piece.
We'll come back to that.
G and Matt, you requested that we do a series on how to build a world for a grand campaign, and we're going to do that in a couple of months.
Right. Yeah. So I do that. But yeah, like top down would be like heavy. Let's start with like the big cosmology, and then kind of go down from there. Whereas bottom up would be like, I'm just going to start with a region. I mean, this is basically what you find in something like Beyond the Wall, or a lot of OSR set things where like, well, you don't need to actually figure out what's.
You need to keep on the borderline
inside
the Cave of Chaos,
right?
And it will grow from there.
Right. So that's the bottom up. And what he recommends, in Arbiter of Worlds, or back in those old Escapist articles, what Macros recommends is what he calls the top-down zoom in. So you do a little bit of top-down stuff, and then you zoom in on the area. So he has a chapter in Arbiter of Worlds, which basically has a really comprehensive breakdown of here's what you actually need in a good setting guide for your players. And what you actually need in a good setting guide for your players, like a local area guide or something like that, what they used to call a gazetteer, is about 10 pages. And what I found is, if players read 10 pages, that's great. That'd be amazing. You're really lucky. A lot of times they won't even read that, and so it just depends on the player and like how much are they, like some people are just like they're really good players, but they don't want to sit and read lore, right? And so it just depends on the person. But 10 pages is about as much as normal people can read or want to read. And so he basically puts in, here's how you break down how much lore do you actually need to develop to run this campaign. Well, initially, and so it breaks down, basically you need 1 paragraph per era, and you need 4 to 5 eras. So like, what's the most ancient stuff, which say only lore masters would know? 1 paragraph, that's all you have. What's the and then what's the basically the equivalent of like the classical period or antiquity, and then what's the slightly more recent stuff, and then the modern period, and then what's happened in the last 20 years, something like that. So you would do like 1 paragraph per of these 4 or 5 eras, and that's all the history, that's all the lore that you're going to put into this guide. Doesn't mean other stuff doesn't exist, or wouldn't come up in adventure design, or doesn't already exist in your head, or it doesn't already exist in like a vast liturgical and poetical cycle that you've already been working on for a long time.
I do have dibs. I just want you to know on one of those. You let me know when.
Yeah, I'll let you know. They're being shipped to my house to sign right now. I have to ship them back, and then they'll be orderable. But I'll give you a little heads up.
Give me a heads up.
Yeah, I'll give you a heads up. So you have all these different. So it's not to say there isn't more lore, but what you need to give your players in terms of lore is like 4 or 5 paragraphs of history. And then he goes on from there, and it's like, now you do a section on what are the main cultures in the starting area, or let's say the main playable cultures that people need to know about. I always include a short section on magic. What is magic in this setting? What does that mean, and how does it work? because I mean, fantasy RPGs, like that's like a really important question. Like, so in my new setting, the 153 sublime paths, which are what spells are called, were made when so in this setting, dragons there were only 13 dragons. Well, now there are 12. Dragons are immortal. They always reincarnate. You kill them, they'll always be reborn. They're part of like the elemental fabric of the universe. Sometimes it might be many ages before they're reborn, but you can never like truly kill one.
Okay.
With one exception, which is at the end of the sort of Age of Legends, way back in the day. The way that the rule of the dragons was overthrown is that the elder races and then mankind came together. They managed to kill the 13th dragon, and then before it could reincarnate, they shattered its heart. And when they shattered its heart, that created the 153 sublime paths, which are the
spells.
The spells. Like that's how basically Vancian magic, you could say, is created in the setting. Now, before that, elves had already had like spell weaving and things like this, but this is how humanity became able to harness magic, which allowed them to defeat, shake off the dominion of the dragons, etc. So you have things like this. So I always like, but of course, like magic and Emporia is like a completely different thing.
Right.
So, and you wouldn't want someone bringing their D&D assumptions in that because it just wouldn't work. So I always like to include a short section on that, a section on every playable race. I always include things like, or races or cultures. I always include things like what are common names for this culture, based on, usually languages I've worked on myself. And then, so once you've done that, you want to do so that should be about half your 10 pages, right? If you're really being economic with words, which I have not been in my current guide, so I'll probably do a little trimming. That should be about like say 6 pages, and then you can do 4 pages of basically the local area. And now with the local area, which is like that 30 by 40 square miles or whatever, where your campaign is mainly going to be set in the beginning, especially in like a sandbox hex exploration guide. What you're looking to do there is basically say what's the recent history of the region. You don't have to go way far back, but just say like, well, here's a nice like 1 paragraph trailer. I would like to think like if I was making a trailer for this region, what's the stuff that I would want to show or say, or like fly over with a helicopter or something like that. So I do like 1 paragraph of that, and then what's the recent history of the region, and then just a 3 to 4 sentence blurb on all of the major locations in the region that the players would know about, and then factions, locations, things like that. Everything gets 3 to 4 sentences, and at the end, here's some rumors.
Yeah.
All of that should take about 10 to 12 pages. And it's probably no more than 5,000 words.
Right, and your players get to skim it and decide what's the most important thing to read.
Right, right. And so then you can take that and you can start adding in all the juicy bits that that the players don't know, and that becomes your actual setting guide.
Yeah,
like a setting Bible. Yeah.
So, and so, Josh, you've been showing me what you've been working on for your new region of Geberkan. So, what are your top 5 things? Because I know you're also using stuff from Arbiter of Worlds to set up your dungeons and such. So, what are your top 5 things that you're like, hey, for a GM who's looking at setting up an area? Because you don't need, right? We're talking 5,000 words, which may seem like a lot, but if you realize you're going into this for multiple years, your use per word, if you will, it's like buying God's work. Yeah, it's a huge investment, but every time I play it, the price per play drops significantly. Still, I need like 10 more games of that, and then it was basically free. Yeah.
Eventually, Chaos Teams can start paying you.
That's right. That would be the dream. What do you put in there, Josh?
Well, Arbiter of Worlds is pretty comprehensive, and that was a pretty comprehensive summary of it. I think the only other thing, I was just scanning through my player's guides, like, okay, what did Richard not hit? The only thing that I put in addition is like campaign themes. Right, these are right, and that can range from.
My only campaign themes are, why do bad things happen to good people?
I'm talking about like things like that. But then also things as simple as, right, these are the tropes that you can rely on, and these are tropes that you absolutely cannot rely on in this world.
Oh.
In fact, if you do, you're probably going to die.
What, Can you give me an example of a trope that don't rely on it, just so I can get a sense of what you're saying?
Magic is good to use.
Oh, okay, yeah, gotcha. Actually, so this brings up an important point, which is I always do like to include a little section at the end to basically say, so what you're calling tropes are what I call implicit assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
And especially for a new player who's like played some other game with me, but not in this setting, or has played D&D a lot, but not anything that I run, is to say, here are implicit assumptions that would get you into trouble. But also, like, here are particular house rules you should know about. So, like, we have like special song rules, we have special burial rules, special passing on adventure XP to future adventurers, things like this, like things you should know. One implicit assumption is you'll be playing different, multiple characters, and probably will not end the campaign with the same character you started with, right? That's a basic implicit assumption. So what I'm really saying is, if you die, don't throw a fit. It's going to happen a lot.
Yep. Take what time you need and then get back on the horse.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's where it just came for Josh, because Josh is running 5e.
Yeah.
Tell me if I'm putting words in your mouth, Josh. But he was running 5e, and he had people who were showing up expecting 5e. And the best one that he and I were talking about is the fact that, like, he made one little change to one cantrip, and he had a lot of players
really upset.
He made light a first level spell, and that changes so much about 5th edition.
Only if you're paying attention to how much light there is.
Yeah, which he does.
Yeah, which most people do not do.
So give us a couple of your changes in tropes and give us like your top 2 or 3.
So one is just a general understanding that, and this one is hard because it's something that I would love to communicate through a campaign. Like, I want the players to feel this, but also it's really relevant right when you start, which is that everybody is desperate. Like, every city is on the edge, and just a few of the wrong directions, and that's gone. It is off the face of the map. And everybody in the world on some level knows this. So when they're when you think, oh, this was just like a minor thing that like, it's just a little bit of trouble. No, it's not, because people are going to act seemingly irrationally, but really they're just acting from a deep-seated sense of despair and conviction that all of this is meaningless. And so they're going to react quite strongly, I suppose, to any kind of perceived threat, which is why, right? Yeah, all of the players like sat back and they went, uh-oh, when they were like, yeah, so what? We flew at the palace. Right? Oh, okay. Well, now we need to hang one of your retainers. And that caught them off guard. What do you, what do you mean?
We need to set an example.
In front of a significant portion of the local populace, you attacked. I don't care what you thought you were doing. You looked like you were attacking the palace and had to be shot down.
Yeah, we can't abide what that would do to the populace.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. And then the other one that's also been really hard to kind of impart to players and get them to take it on is I don't, in Gebrakan, the problems are so old and long established that finding the right creature and killing it is not going to cut it. So if you want to change something, you need to invest in a right, a company. You need to start a company. You need to get your name out there, right? You're going to do stuff. Other people are going to try to take credit for it. How are you going to react to that? So the theme that I've put in the guide is no change without great endeavor. So sure, you could go out and raid dungeons and find powerful things, and when you die, things are going to be exactly as they have been for the last 15,000 years.
Right. There is no sack of hit points that you can rupture and change the world.
My jam, I love you. Like you keep telling me if you ever like play a character in my campaign, right? The plan is right, create your own little compound with a teleportation circle, get it running, and then profit.
That's right. Yeah. I want to play a wizard in this game whose sole goal is to, instead of traveling through the wilderness, build a merchant guild that uses teleportation circles.
Yes. Nice.
So I love all of that. Like, I really want to play Gebercan. Maybe we can, if he needs some, because it is a kind of world kind of built on these core assumptions that Richard and I really enjoy. But my answer to, and I was not always good at making the implicit assumptions, and I actually had players react badly to it, because my answer to why do bad things happen to good people is the consequence list. I keep a running track of the fallout from every player action. And yes, you are heroes, but that doesn't mean that everything you do is going to come out smelling like roses, and there won't be repercussions to your actions. Yeah. I've had players who are like, what are you doing? I just was doing the right thing and I'm a hero and I don't want any backlash. I'm like, you're probably at the wrong table.
Yeah.
But the consequence list for me is one of the key things of running a grand campaign, because it builds the emergent storyline, not necessarily based off anything I'm doing, but locally in reaction to what the players do.
Yeah. So I don't keep a consequence list specifically. Usually that stuff is just kind of like by feel for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I've never specifically maintained one. I always just, when I'm making my notes, I'm like, this is most of my internal life as a human being is stuck in like 6th century Iron Age Northern Europe. And so I just sort of think about, so that was great for running tour, because you get to be like, well,
what's the most Iron Agey thing to do?
Yeah, it's like, oh, well, you appear to have impinged upon my honor, so yeah, I guess I'm demanding some weregild next session. If I don't get it, then there's going to be problems. Things like that. Like you're just like, but whether you keep it a list or you're doing it by intuition, I mean, I always make just like a bullet list of notes at the end of a session of, here's what happened, so that I can write a good recap for next time, but also just like, this, so this. So I guess that is kind of a consequence. I've never called it that or something, but I just I'll make, bullet points of which actions are going to require a response. And I will just say, it's very important. If you don't want to come across as just like trying to punish your characters for breathing, which we'd like to talk like that, but that's not really what any of us want to do. I think. But it's very important to also keep track of the good things that your characters do, the successes and things like this. And I always have usually a pretty good idea of what do my different NPCs want, and if you as your characters, you help an NPC towards the goal that they want, that's going to come back around to you in a good way.
Yeah, and the consequence is always, it's the ripple effect.
Right. Yeah.
I think I called it a consequence list because at one point it was in one of the Tanar games. You guys did something, and I was writing something down, and it was like Christopher was like, "What are you writing?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm making the consequence list of this action," and people were like, "You keep a list of," or I'm writing the consequences of this action, and Chris was like, "You keep a list of that?" And I was like, well, yeah, and it started being
I see.
But it's also the positive things,
right?
The positive changes in the world, because those are also ripple effects, but they create new opportunities in the campaign world for you.
And this is an important way of, Magnus talks about this in Arbiter of Worlds, but the most important thing to me about this style of campaign is that it's the style of campaign that most maximizes player agency. If you have, if your actions have long-term consequences, and as my dad often reminded me when I was a kid, consequences can be good or bad. You get to choose. Most of the time you get to choose. Actually, there's a little bit of luck and fate and other things that work in it as well. And usually as a GM, if you're a good storyteller and you read a lot, you'll have a good sense of that. I mean, sometimes just like, sometimes people are evil, sometimes bad things happened, and it's not a thing that you brought in on yourself. I mean, one of my favorite things in a game, we could use this a bit in Mirkwood and use this a bit in Emboria. One of my favorite things in a long-term campaign like this is just a plague. Because plagues are, you know, it's nice when, oh, this is an evil magical plague and we can go like, you know, steal the heart of a dragon and, you know, do whatever and make the plague go away. But actually, most of the time, historically speaking, plagues are just awful. And there's not a lot you can do about it. And there's like no one you could go and kill and make this stop.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's one of my favorite things to use because it does add to like a feeling of desperation, but it's a faceless enemy. You know, it's very frustrating.
And other times your character pays real money to have a poet write a song on your behalf to give to your intended. And you do so well at describing the woman that the poet goes to her, heavily implies that you're dead, and then tries to move in on that. And then, of course, you get a 10-episode sidetrack where you have to climb to the highest spike in the world and steal a ram from the storm god just to prove that you're not dead.
Yeah, he did such a good job describing his beloved that the poet basically was like, she sounds amazing. Yeah, I will go take this letter to you. Hello. Word of your beauty and power has reached me afar off, and I'm here to woo you. And Josh gets back and he's like, I've done it. I've climbed to the top of Caro Finn, who's that guy? Didn't I hire you? Oh, he's the other guy. He's my other possible betrothed. But yes, so talking about...
He ended as a mindless thrall to the lunar goddess, so I'm happy.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah.
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 We are all us.
We are all us. You and I started some crap on the Exploring Glorantha because we were talking about Tarsh, and Evan wore his moon rune t-shirt. And it was like representing lunar Tarsh. I'm like, screw you, representing old Tarsh. But yes, the idea of player agency is a big part of the Grand Campaign. And I've seen it in both of your recaps as you were talking about it. I don't know where I heard it. I saw somebody write it on the internet, and I can't cite my source, and I always feel bad about that. But I think it was on a Dungeon Professor video. But if you get to the end of a campaign and you got everything you wanted in the exact way you wanted it, you had no choice in playing that campaign.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know that I've ever seen that written out or something, but that's definitely a philosophy. That of mine is yeah.
Well, and it's built into Josh's implicit assumptions, right? Like no change without great, investment. And so, Josh, how do you run a consequence list? Do you keep track of anything like that? Kind of how do you deal with the spinning out of player actions? Well, you had a blood goddess ascend to the throne because your players didn't do anything. So,
blood for the blood goddess.
They did do things, but then they died before they could do the rest of the things.
Can't say that on the channel.
Yeah, mine is much less threateningly called the ongoing things list. And it's mostly for me to track where are NPCs, what are they doing, and how do they feel about the party. And things that the party has done that other people would know about, so that even in a first meeting, an NPC could go, "Oh, hey, you're the guys that did this," or "You're the ones who did this thing. We need to talk about that."
Something I often do right along those lines is to just write out before a session. I'll write out 2 or 3 sentences of dialogue for an NPC that would reflect how has their attitude towards the players changed based on things the players have done.
Mm-hmm.
And I might or might not actually work that dialogue into the conversation, but it just helps me get like have a little empathy for the NPC, see the party through their eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I also keep track of diseases that party members don't know about yet. Right, like
Seems a little specific.
Well, they've contracted it, but symptoms haven't started yet, and so the player has already forgotten about it by the next session.
Yeah, it still seems specific.
I think it's going on right now.
It's going on right now. And then just other details like, yep, this person accidentally turned their skin blue with a spell, and that's still there, so people are going to react to that.
Mm-hmm. Or Pepto-Bismol pink.
Or just things like if you're running Clash, then you have to keep a secret track of how much shadow your players have.
Yeah,
things like that.
Yeah. One thing that I've been doing with this new Jackals campaign is I have a list of what the next year is called, because there are ways to like figure out what based off the stars in the sky and the omens what the next year will be called. And so midpoint of the year, I have one player roll on it, and then I have like 4 or 5 choices of what this actually could mean. And so they roll the year, they figure out what the name for the next year is, and then I have them roll what that actually means. Next year the year of Red Jaws does not look positive for my players in the Jackals.
Maybe it's just pretty doggies.
It could be pretty doggies. Well, that brings us to the end of this grand campaign. Next month, we're going to talk about factions and why factions are awesome for grand campaigns. And I do think we're going to get into world building for a grand campaign and setting building. And I will have, hopefully, by the end of the factions episode, you guys will have the 10-page setting guide for Axia, our 2E AD&D game that we're going to be playing. So that way you guys have it in advance. We got to get you over here to make your character. Josh's character is sitting right there.
I'm going to rub my butt on it.
Josh's character is essentially Zoolander. That was his best role.
I'm going to rub my butt on it, and then I'm going to take some antibiotics.
His name is Derek.
Proving that even really, 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 really beautiful fighters can die in a tragic gasoline dragon accident.
Now, hold on. Isn't Zoolander's name actually Derek?
I think it might be.
So that's really funny because I was going off the guy from The Good Place.
Whenever you say Derek, like I think, is that the prince's name in Swan Princess?
It's just an amazing coincidence. I love this.
People know this is a thing. People have seen this. I have a lot of small children.
Yeah. I am waiting. So we just finished all of the Mission Impossibles with Zane, and he loved them. But he's like, "What else have I seen this actor?" And I'm like, "Literally nothing." But I've shown you the trailer for Legend, and when you are old enough, we will watch possibly Tom Cruise's best movie.
But before then, you guys can watch Eyes Wide Shut. I mean,
nope,
no.
Well, all right, we will be back next time. Until next time, gentlemen, as always, thank you. Just a plug for Richard, if you haven't, Richard's been doing the Universal History
Universal History podcast with Jonathan Pajot,
which has been amazing.
Yeah, basically like how do people think about history before history became like a dumb thing. And then also Evan's Fool podcast.
Mm-hmm. If you like
Ancient
Tolkien.
Faith, if you like Tolkien. A new podcast coming out about the history of Christianity in England that should be dropping at the end of this month.
Awesome.
And yeah, that's it for now.
I will look forward to that. Josh, you got anything else that's going on online that we should know about for you?
I'm looking for a classics job or a web development job if anybody's hiring.
All right. Send all of your email to I don't remember what our email address is. It's in the link below. I will edit this out.
Check the link in the doobly-doo.
In the doobly-doo. Yeah. All right, so until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, stay gaming, and we will be back next month with more Grand Campaign.